All right, before we go ahead and get started with chapter 9, which is my favorite chapter, so I'm a little sad I don't get to teach this to you in person, but I want to give you some background vocabulary just to help prepare you for chapter 9. So it's all about analyzing data, looking at statistics, which is exactly why it's my favorite. But before we do that, we need to know some of these terms. So I'm sure you've heard a few of these, but I just want to make sure that we're familiar with them all. So a survey is a study of one or more characteristics of a group. So you've probably taken a survey, or you can think of a time which maybe your parents got a survey in the mail, or maybe you received one in an email, but they're looking at specific characteristics that they want to analyze. Now, a population is an entire group, so the whole thing that you want information about. But a sample is only a part of that population because sometimes it's not realistic to survey the entire population. So let's think, like if we wanted to know across the whole United States, what is their favorite kind of pizza? It is not realistic to survey every single person in the United States. So instead what we might do is just pick a sample or a smaller group. But the issue comes into play is how do we pick who we're going to ask? If I only ask my friends, does that really represent everybody in the United States? If I only ask kids, does that represent everybody in the United States? So you have to be careful when you're picking who to ask in that sample, how you pick them. So we're going to look at a couple of different sampling methods. So the first one is a random sample where everybody has an equal chance of being selected. So think of if I wanted to survey all of the kids in pre-algebra class. That's reasonable. I could do that if we were in school, or maybe I would send out an email. But if I don't want to ask all of the students, what I might do instead is a random sample. So maybe I put all of your names down on a piece of paper, and then I throw them in a big bowl, and I draw them randomly out. Then everybody has a fair chance at getting drawn. I'm not picking, I'm not being persuaded in any certain way. Or maybe I number you all, 1 through 30. And then I randomly use a number generator online to pick numbers 1 through 30. I don't know who's going to get picked. It's just a random number of people. Now, what happens if I happen to draw all boys? Does that represent our pre-algebra class? Probably not, because we have girls in the class too. So maybe I want to get some girls and some boys. So instead what I might do is a stratified random sample, that second one here. A stratified random sample just means you first divide it into groups. So maybe I would divide you guys into boys and girls. Then I would randomly select 5 boys, 5 girls. That way it ensures that I'm still getting boys and girls' opinions, but then it's still random because I'm gathering from each of you. Now, let's think about the whole high school. AP high school is our population. I cannot sample all the kids from AP high school. I don't have time for that, right? So what I might do, instead of just randomly, because if I randomly do it, I might get all freshmen. That's not going to represent everybody in the high school. So I might stratify on grade level. So I have a list of 9th graders, a list of 10th graders, a list of 11th, and a list of 12. Then from each of those lists, I might randomly choose 6 people. That way it gives me a little bit of the each grade level of that population. A systematic sample, the third one there, is a rule that we apply. So maybe I have my list in alphabetical order, and I'm going to pick every third person. That's my rule, every third person. So that would be systematic. Or maybe I just decide to pick everybody with a last name that starts with the letter T. That's my rule, starts with a T. So that would be known as a systematic sample. Now, a convenience sample is just like the name says it is. Whoever you can easily get to. So it might be convenient for me to stand outside the lunch line during 4th hour and ask people, please respond to my survey. Now, right now, standing outside the lunch line probably isn't going to be that helpful since nobody's at school, but I could ask in an email. I just email everybody out and I only have the emails for the kids in my class. That would be convenient for me because I have their emails. So a convenient sample is what is easiest for you. Maybe you're in study hall. You just ask the kids in your study hall class. And then the last one is self-selected. This is also known as a volunteer sample. That's usually what we hear it as. It's where people select themselves. So maybe you put a flyer out around town looking for people to answer this survey. Those people are going to volunteer, or if they don't, you will never know. Or maybe if I sent an email out to everybody, the volunteer ones are only the ones that respond. So volunteer means they choose to do it, they volunteer, or they participate by volunteering. Now there are pros and cons to each of these, and hopefully you're kind of thinking in your head like, that doesn't seem very fair, or that is, but that seems like really hard. There are pros and cons to each of them. I want you to kind of think about them. So just pause this video and think about some positives and some negatives for each of these samples. All right, let's take a look at this first example. The owners of a company with several factories conduct a survey to determine whether employees are informed about safety regulations. Okay, this is what I usually change this in class. I say the owners of Casey's. Conduct a survey to determine whether they're informed about safety regulations. At each factory, 50 employees are chosen at random to complete the survey. What type of sampling method is this? And also, what is the population? So they are only surveying several factories. So the whole population would be all factories, because that's what we're really looking to get information about, is all factories. But the sampling method, that's where I'm really interested right now. If they look at each factory, they're grouping it based on who works at those factories. Or in this case, if I'm looking at all the Casey's in the state of Iowa, and I choose New Hartford Casey's, Applington Casey's, Grundy Center Casey's, Allison Casey's, I am picking on those groups. So I am making sure that I get a person from each of those locations. So that makes it stratified because we're grouping first. Then 50 employees are chosen at random. So it is a stratified random sample. Now this next question says, now what if the company just asks people whose last name starts with M? What type is that? If you remember, M is our rule. If you have a rule, that is called a systematic sample. Now let's think about, are these good samples? If we look at each factory and stratify, that kind of distributes the fairness of it, right? If I'm pulling people from every Casey's in Iowa, we're looking at every Casey's. But let's take a look at the second one. If I only care about the workers whose last name starts with M, what if just by chance, everybody whose last name starts with M happens to work just in Allison and in Applington? Now, if you think about Allison and Applington, their Casey's are a little bit older. Does that really represent the entire state of Iowa? No. So you have to be careful and you have to make considerations when deciding what type of sample to use. So a bias sample is kind of what I just alluded to. It's when you have a sample that doesn't represent the whole. So if I'm only asking Applington and Allison Casey's, that surely doesn't represent the entire state of Iowa. So let's take and we kind of already talked about example 2, so I'm going to go ahead and skip down to a bias question. A bias question is one that encourages a response. So if I were standing at the front of the classroom right now, and you were all in class with me, and I said, hey, math is your favorite subject, isn't it? You might feel obligated to say yes, because I'm your math teacher, right? I'm the one giving you the math grade. And it might not be your favorite subject, but you might feel pressured into doing that. That's what a bias question does. It encourages a response. So if we take a look at example 3, letter A, it says, don't you agree that the voting age should be lowered to 16 because many 16-year-olds are responsible and informed? Okay, well, by them saying, don't you agree? That's persuading you to say, oh, yes, I do agree. And now, adding this information about 16-year-olds being responsible and informed, I don't know about that, right? That's trying to persuade you saying, yes, they are. So instead, we might just say, should the voting age be lowered to 16? And that's it. Keep it simple. Should the voting age be lowered to 16? Letter B, do you think the city park should risk an increase in population by allowing expansion to the Northern Industrial Park? Whew, it's a mouthful. Okay, first of all, the word risk makes us feel negative. It's like, oh, I don't want to be risky. So instead of saying risk by pollution, we're keeping that out of it. We don't want to be persuasive. We just say, do you think the city should allow for the expansion of the Northern Park? Maybe that's all we say. Now I'm not persuading them to answer yes, I do, or no, I don't. It's just a very neutral question. All right, and this is not a joke. In a survey about Americans' interest in soccer, the first 25 people admitted to a high school soccer game were asked, how interested are you in the world's most popular sport, soccer? Well, first of all, is this going to be a biased sample? What do you think? Yeah? No? Yes, it is. If people are going to a soccer game, they probably like soccer, or they're supporting somebody who likes soccer. Otherwise, they won't go. So we are getting a biased sample because already the spectators at a soccer game are going to like it. And also, if they are admitted first, who are the people that show up early to a soccer game? Typically the ones that really like it, or maybe even the parents. So this would result in a biased sample standing outside a gate at a soccer field. Now the second part B here, is the question potentially biased? What do you think? How interested are you in the world's most popular sport, soccer? Well, if they tell me it's the world's most popular sport, I might feel obligated to feel, yeah, well, everybody else likes it, I should too. So to make it not biased, we might just say, how interested are you in getting rid of that soccer? Or if I just want sports in general to even make it less specific, how interested are you in sports? Which sports are you interested in? And then that allows them to pick other ones besides soccer. So we have to be careful not only of who we pick for our samples, but also how we ask questions to people in those samples. All right, so we're going to pause there. That's just an introduction to Chapter 9, where we're going to talk more about data analysis and some statistical analysis. So go ahead and watch the next video for Chapter 9.